So this is part 6, the final video on decimals, so dividing decimals. I mentioned at the end of part 5. Here, let's look at this division problem. 6/100 divided by 2/10. Step 1, the divisor must be a whole number in order for you to divide. If it's not a whole number, multiply it by a power of 10. Now, a power of 10 would be like 10, 100, 1,000. You're going to move the decimal to the right of the number. So let's put a pause for a second to take a look. A helpful hint, when you multiply a number by a power of 10, like the number 2, 2 times 10 is 20, that decimal 2 is right after the 2. When you multiply by 10, it becomes 20 by moving the decimal 1 to the right. Think of how many zeros are in 10. There's 1 0. When you move the decimal 1 to the right, you're multiplying it by 10. Look at 2/10. I move this decimal 1 to the right to make it a whole number. 2/10 times 10 is 2.0, or just 2. The faster way is just moving the decimal 1 to the right, so it becomes a quick lesson on when you're multiplying by powers of 10. The number 5 has a decimal after it. So if I multiply 5 times 10, you get 50. That decimal moved over 1 to the right and became 50. I multiply 5, let's say, by 100, which has 2 zeros, so I move the decimal twice to the right to make it 500. And same thing with 1,000, move it 3 times to the right. So that was a quick lesson on when you're changing a decimal number into a whole number. So let's look at our first example. In this problem, 6/100 divided by 2/10, I realize this needs to be a whole number, so I move the decimal 1 to the right to make it become 2 point. And if whatever happens to the divisor, you have to move the same number of decimal places in the dividend. So if you look at step 2, after you change the divisor into a whole number, if you had to make the divisor turn into a whole number, move the same number of decimal places in the dividend. So I did that here. I moved this 1 to the right, which means multiply by 10. You move this decimal 1 to the right. So now we have 6/10 divided by 2. The divisor has to be a whole number. The dividend can be a decimal. Once I do the first 2 steps, now divide. Bring the decimal up into the quotient, add zeros to the dividend if needed. So here I brought the decimal straight up into the answer. Let's start dividing. 2 goes into 0 0 times, 2 goes into 6 3 times, 2 times 3 is 6, there's nothing left over, 3/10 is the quotient. Now to see if my answer is correct, I actually changed this to 6/100 divided by 2/10 as fractions. I solved it and it proved it's correct. Let's try another example. So let's look at 1 4/10 divided by 5/10. This has to be the whole number. So I move this 1 to the right and start dividing. And the answer is 2 8/10.